So, what's next? You know you're Patriot, you think you have your lineage correct, but how do you document and source all those names? Let's take a look at how to do that today. Hi, my name is Jelaine Crabtree, and I'm a volunteer genealogist for the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution. The purpose of these videos is to help you if you are filing for an application to join the organization or working on a supplement for another Patriot. You can also use the tips in these videos if you're just checking on your descendancy or lineage for fun or for another organization. The question today is, how do I prove and source all of those names, dates, and places that I have in my lineage? So let's take a look at how to do that. There's an old saying, genealogy without sources is mythology, and the DAR takes this very seriously. Every name, date, and place within your lineage must be documented. There are different rules for different generations. So the first thing we're going to do is look at generations 1, 2, and 3. You must prove everything in these generations. A birth date and place for you in generation 1, a birthplace and date for your husband if you desire to include him in the application. This is also generation 1. Your husband does not need to be included in your application. However, if you have daughters or granddaughters who may wish to join the organization, you'll be saving them some time and steps if you include the information for your husband. If your husband is included, you also need to include a marriage record. For generations 2 and 3, you need the birth date in place, the death date in place, if applicable, a marriage record showing the date in place. The documentation that you should use in these generations would include birth certificates, death certificates if applicable, and note that some death certificates will have the birth information on it. So if your death certificate includes the birth information and the death information, then you do not need to submit a birth certificate. Marriage record showing the date and place. You can use your national number and Patriot ancestor. You can use another member's national number and Patriot ancestor. For more on this technique, see my previous video on the GRS. It is important to link the generations, so a document must be included that links the appropriate person in the generation to their parents in the next generation of the lineage. For example, your birth certificate would list your parents. Therefore, that is the link between you in generation 1 and your parents in generation 2. Documentation for generations 4 and beyond is a little different. You must prove at least one date in place in these generations. So a birth date in place and or a death date in place. A marriage record showing the date and place is optional. The more information you can put in these generations, the better. So the more documentation you can submit in your packet, it is a better chance for you in proving your lineage. Examples of direct evidence would include your birth certificates, death certificates, marriage records showing date and place, an obituary, land records, probate records, census records, historical books and records, your national number and Patriot ancestor, and another member's national number and Patriot ancestor. Once again, a document must be included that links the appropriate person in the generation to their parents in the next generation of the lineage. And this is where trouble can arise. Sometimes it is difficult when you're looking at a family before 1850 to link the generations. What if you can't find a document? Reach out to your chapter registrar for help in finding optional documents. Your chapter registrar may need to write an analysis using indirect evidence to prove the parentage of each generation. However, only one analysis can be written per packet application. So now that you have an idea of what documentation you might need, let's take a look at how that would apply with an actual application and what it would look like on the page 3, which is where we submit our documentation. This is an older application that has been filled out about 2 years ago. You'll notice that at this time, the wife in generation 2 was still alive. Therefore, no death record has been recorded for her. When we start with generation 3, we have plenty of names and dates that have been verified by documentation, as we'll see in a minute. This also includes to generation 6. Once we hit generation 6, we'll notice that there's no place for the death of Mary Ann Williams. And in generation 7 and 8, we are also missing death places, although we do have death dates. And when we get to the last person on the list, which is generation 9, this is our patriot information, which also has no birthplace for the wife. We go to our resources, which is on page 3, or our references, and see that the first 2 generations are using a national number and patriot. So this is not an application, but a supplement. But in the second generation, you can see the words new info, birth certificate. This is indicating that the person who is using this national number had proven the first 2 generations, but they had gone through their mother. And this application goes through the father. So the birth certificate for the father is submitted once again with the parents indicated so that we can tie him to the 3rd generation. Once we get to the 3rd generation, you start to see those little codes for birth certificate and death records and marriage records in generations 3, 4, and 5. In generation 5, we also have an obituary that we're using, and a census, and a find a grave tombstone photo. In the 6th generation, we are also using a will. And in the 7th generation, we are using some census records. When we get to the 8th generation, we can tie on to a national number of another member with the patriot that we were working for, which was William Van Horn. Your registrar will be able to help you on how to cite other things besides the birth records and death records and marriage records. There are set guidelines on obituaries, newspaper articles, census, etc. So I hope that clears up a few questions for documentation. Always know that your registrar and membership committee are there to help you. If you are looking to be a new member, you will be contacting or contacted by a registrar who will be very helpful in finding the documentation that you need. Always collect whatever you can before you see her. I hope that you found a lot of information here that you can use, and that you will like my video, comment on it, tell me what else you might want to hear about, subscribe to my channel, and ring the notification bell. Again, thank you so much. I'm Jelaine Crabtree with your Supplemental Minute on Documentation. Have a nice day.